Hello friends, this is Worm, and it is Monday, which means it's time for another episode of Exotic Recrafting, the series where we look at underused, weak, or straight up bad exotics and talk about how we can potentially make them better. And this week I wanted to talk about hard lights, and I almost thought about grouping Borealis in with hard lights, but I decided not to. I decided we'll do Borealis in a different video. But hard lights, I think, holds a really dear place in a lot of people's hearts, rightfully so. It was a D1 launch exotic. Exotic, and it was a blast to use back then. It's still fun to use now, but in terms of its viability inside of PvE, it has dropped off substantially. So let's first of all take a look at what hard light does. Of course, hard light is an auto rifle. Oops, sorry, my chair just decided it's gonna go down. Hard light is a 600 round pin auto rifle. It comes with the perk hard lights, which increases rounds fired from this weapon over penetrate targets. They ricochet off surfaces, and when they ricochet, they deal more damage. So if you shoot the floor and those bullets end up hitting an enemy, they're going to do bonus damage, which is pretty cool, don't get me wrong. But that's its intrinsic perk. Its unique perk is the fundamentals, which allows you to cycle between void, arc, and solar energy in that order. And with each of those energies, whichever one you're using, they come with different stat buffs. Void is stability, and I think aim assist maybe. Arc is handling and range, and then solar is reload and airborne effectiveness. There we go, that's the three. But what is hard light good for? Well, hard light at one point was in my opinion, was a very viable option inside of PvE. And the reason why is because hard light does a very good job of taking care of enemy shields. Because currently, I think well, technically there is a strand over shield, but it's not very common. But enemy shields in Destiny 2, for the most part, are either arc, void, or solar. And in Grandmaster content, especially back in the day when match game was a modifier, which match game was a modifier that essentially made it almost impossible to break an enemy shield if you weren't using the right elemental type. And hard light found a place in the meta because back in those days when match game was present, hard light could fill the role of the shield breaker and allow your other two teammates in a Grandmaster, for example, to use whatever they wanted instead of having to restrict their loadout to match whatever shields you would encounter. And that's, while it wasn't the best thing in the game, it definitely gave hard light more viability. I guess you could also make an argument that it had a place when it comes to element. It still has a place when it comes to elemental burns, because it can shift through all those different damage types. But at the end of the day, why would you use hard lights for, say, a void burn when you can use just insert whatever void auto rifle you wanted to for the same effect? But with that being said, when match game was taken out of Destiny 2, hard light fell off tremendously, and it's a shame because, like I said, it's a really cool weapon. So what is, also in terms of the I forgot to mention here, in terms of the intrinsic trait that it has with the hard light, the over penetrating rounds they're cool. The ricocheting rounds are cool, but they don't feel very useful in the majority of content that we have in Destiny 2. I mean, really, when was the last time you had a weapon, or were using hard light, specifically, and said, oh wow, these over penetrating rounds are absolutely melting enemies? Like, I don't know about y'all, but it really hasn't ever happened for me personally. So I don't know if that's, maybe you're into that, that's fine. Same thing with the ricochet, like the ricochet bonus damage, like it's a lot, but it's not worth it, and it's kind of difficult. Like imagine like sitting and taking the time to find the right angle to shoot a boss so that your rounds are doing more damage, or just shoot enemies in general so that your rounds are doing more damage. It doesn't feel very intuitive to use. It's a cool feature, but it's not very useful. So how can we make hard light better? Now, my initial thought was, okay, first of all, just slap on anti-barrier rounds. And if anybody's been watching this series for a while, y'all know I'm not a big fan of just making one simple change like adding on anti-barrier rounds, but I feel like anti-barrier rounds could potentially make sense on hard light. I mean, it is kind of a shield breaking weapon, so why not give it the ability to break barrier shields as well as solar, arc, and void shields? But that led me to my next idea. Well, if it's got this niche for breaking shields, what if instead of having to manually switch between each of the damage types, like you could also start shooting an enemy shield and the weapon would adapt to whatever shield type you're shooting. So for example, you know, you start the strike or whatever you're doing, you have it on void, you can switch it over to solar because you're using the solar subclass. But when you run across an arc shield and you start shooting that arc shield, it automatically switches to arc damage, and it'll stay arc damage until you switch it back over to solar, void, or whatever you want to use. That would also be a really neat idea. It would definitely help with the shield breaking, because how many times have you been using a weapon and you want to break an enemy shield, but your teammate breaks it before you get the opportunity to? Or, you know, the shield gets broken in the course of you trying to break it. You know, you're shooting it with hard light, for example, and it's almost broken, but your teammate just happens to deal the last little bit of damage to actually break said shield. It's pretty frustrating, and that's kind of one of the issues with changing ammo types. Like, you know, if I'm using void, for example, and I have a solar shield I need to take care of, I have to cycle through 2 modes. And the cycling, it doesn't take like forever, but it's not necessarily the fastest thing that you can do. So the cycling could be completely just avoided if it naturally adapted to the enemy's shield type. But with that being said, I felt like there was more we could do for hard light, because again, enemy shields, they're not hard to break. Legendary weapons feel like they break them at the same speed. You don't really have to match the elemental damage type to effectively break a shield. Like the addition you get is nice. A little explosion around said enemy is nice, but at the same time, I felt like, you know, there should just be more to it than that. So insert the rework or whatever that idea that I had for hard light, and this comes with more of like an elemental affinity style play style. So I have a couple ideas here. I'm not gonna say all of these should be applied, but 1, 2, you know, a combination of some of them would help. But first of all, with the elemental affinity, the first thing I thought of was, what if kills with the weapon elemental type that matches your subclass grant a subclass specific buff? So for example, if you are playing a void subclass and you get a void kill, you would get an overshield or devour. If you're on solar, you would get radiant. If you're on arc, you get amplified, as long as you're using the right, the corresponding elemental damage type. Thought, hey, that would be a pretty decent idea, because that would help, you know, bring it up into the fold, especially for void users. You know, imagine being able to get an overshield on ranged kills, like just for matching the weapon to your subclass. Like that right there, in my opinion, would instantly shoot hard light up to potentially the top of the meta. But I think the issue that you'd have is definitely in the crucible, like getting an overshield every time you're getting a kill. So maybe there's an internal cooldown. For example, once you get an overshield, you can't get another one until it's broken, and then there's like a 3-second cooldown between it or something like that. There's some kind of balancing factor. But again, when discussing these exotic recrafting, this is more directed towards PvE activities. And specifically, I didn't bring up restoration for the solar variant, because I think Red Death is probably going to have something to do with restoration. It is coming back as a solar weapon, but use your imagination for that. But that was the first idea I have, is, you know, matching your kill with the elemental type that matches your subclass grants that subclass debuff. Now, the next thing that I thought of was, hey, what if kills also triggered your element specific debuffs? So you're getting you're getting a kill. Once you kill an enemy, you get, you know, it does a volatile explosion. Right as soon as that enemy dies, it explodes into volatility and spreads volatile to other enemies. That would be void. Of course, for solar, basically just gives it incandescent. As you get a kill, it spreads scorch. And then for arc, obviously volt shot esque perk. I don't know if necessarily reloading would be the thing to do with that, because that would literally just be volt shot, but maybe have it so that as you get it, like once you get a kill, it'll automatically make your next shot jolt the next target you shoot, or something like that. I think that would be a nice bit of flavor, because then you wouldn't have to tie it down to your subclass. For example, if you're on an arc subclass and you're using the solar variant, you can spread scorch to enemies. Or if you're using void, you can spread scorch to enemies, or you can jolt enemies. Or of course, if you wanted to double up, use void, spread volatile. Like that would be a really nice feature to have. And again, this idea here where kills trigger specific elemental debuffs, this wouldn't be tied to your subclass. Like this just does it. Not only that, but it could also, you know, it could make hard light a champion killing monster, because you could jolt a overload champion, you could use, maybe not, actually, no, I don't think it would turn into a champion destroyer, because not talking about volatile rounds, just adding volatility. And I think that's a big thing that I do want to point out here. Granting like volatile rounds, I don't think that's necessarily the way to go. I think that just that kill should trigger volatile, or the kill should trigger you know, scorch or jolt or whatever to enemies around it. But that of course begs the question, well, okay, you know, the first one we talked about was if it matches your elemental subclass type. What if you're using a darkness element? Now hard light is a, I mean, it's a light based exotic. It's literally hard light. It's in the name. What if you're using a darkness based exotic? And I thought this would be this is an interesting idea. What if when you have a darkness based, or actually not even with the darkness based subclasses, but what if you could trigger a buff for hard light, just for hard light specifically, by getting elemental kills with a darkness element? For example, if you're using stasis and you throw a glacier grenade and you shatter it and you kill an enemy, or maybe kill multiple enemies, that will supercharge hard light. And then whenever you equip hard light for 10 seconds, you get like a 50% damage boost or something crazy like that. That would be really awesome, because hard light, solar, void, and arc, those don't really mash well with the darkness based subclasses. So I think that giving it that extra damage for getting multiple darkness subclass skills would be a really cool idea. And of course, a balancing factor on top of that would, you know, maybe after that happens, because 50% or a 50% damage buff is a lot, mind you. Like that's a lot. That's more than most like damage dealing perks give you in Destiny 2. So, you know, 50% is a lot. So maybe there's like a cooldown, like after that 10 seconds of supercharged hard light, is over, then you go on a 10-second cooldown, so you can't activate it again. Maybe another hurdle to activate that 50% damage boost is, instead of just getting like 1 kill or 2 kills with the darkness based subclass, like have it trigger on multiple kills, because Strand and Stasis both are really capable of getting multi kills. Like Strand especially, if you're using, you know, Strand Warlock with, you know, the Brood Weaver, whatever, the Threadling build, sorry, that's what I'm thinking of, Threadling build, like you can easily get a bunch of kills really quickly. Maybe it would make more sense to balance it so that it has that. But at the same time, you could still be using a light-based subclass. Say you want to use solar subclass because you like your restoration and stuff like that. If you have a Strand or Kinetic primary, or a Strand or Kinetic heavy on, and you get multiple kills with that weapon, that darkness-based weapon, it could also trigger hard light. I think that would be, I think that's how we could improve hard light. Again, I think hard light definitely holds nostalgia, sorry, in my heart. Plus it has some really cool looking ornaments. But with that being said, I want to hear your thoughts on hard light. How do you feel we could make it better? If you're one of those people who uses hard light and says it's perfect as it is, mind you, like we're talking about buffing your favorite weapon, okay? So give me a break there. But anyways, yeah, that's it for this video, guys. Like if you enjoyed, drop a sub because it helps the channel out a lot. We're almost at 1100, so that's super exciting. And yeah, do me a favor, watch the videos you see on the end screen here, because for whatever reason YouTube thinks you'll like them. Guys, I'll see y'all next time. Bye for now.